Great. Well, welcome everybody. I'm happy today to welcome a member of our crew, Walter Hubbard, who's going to uh, moderate a conversation that will provide something of a capsule summary of what we've done over not only this year, but over the last couple of years related to climate issues and particularly the electric grid. These are incredibly important topics from the point of view of the way we live, our standard of living, our way of life. And Walter, I think, is one of those people who's an absolute student. I think that's a fair statement, a student of all of this, beginning when
Okay,
he was
student.
very young, right?
Yeah,
So, Walter, I'm going to turn the floor over to you and let's get the show rolling.
sure. So, my name is Walter Hubbard, and the I've got a background in power engineering for about 15 years, but in the last 25 years, I've been working with computers and troubleshooting computers. Um, let's see. First of all, Ron, I wanted to say that I'm really looking forward to the fall lineup. It sounds like you've got a lot of good, interesting topics coming up. Um, and what I'm going to try to do is to get our Zoom meetings into a hybrid version so that we can meet at the Jenks Center in person, but also on Zoom for those who prefer Zoom, and especially if they're at a distance. So, I'm looking forward to doing that. We're going to try to get that working over the summer.
Great.
Um, Oh, and if you don't mind, I'm going to mute everybody. And so when it, but during the talk, this is going to be a discussion. So please raise your hand, and you don't need to wait till the end of the discussion, although we're going to have a discussion period at the end. Um, and the but this way we can kind of keep everything the noise at a minimum. So I'm going to mute everybody, and then I'm gonna let's see. Yes. Okay. Good. All right. So I'm going to share my screen. I put a little PowerPoint presentation together. So please tell me if you can see this or not. Let's see. All right. So can everybody see that present? The uh, Well, wait a minute. Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Good. Okay. All right. So truly, this is going to be discussion. Raise your hand whenever you have a question, and then I'll recognize you. Okay. So let's see. So we in the next 25 years, 50 years, we need to keep our eyes on the prize. And that prize is we know that um, global warming is real. Um, that's pretty much an undisputed fact. We have talked about this in our meetings with Kerry Emanuel and Richard Linson, um, and we listened to competing voices on that. I come out with the um, clear understanding that global warming is real, and global warming is caused by CO2 and methane and other sources. But we need to reduce CO2 production. And then how can we do that? So we can start increasing efficiency. One way to increase efficiency is drive more efficient vehicles, like going from a standard internal combustion engine to a hybrid version. We can increase the efficiency of driving by probably 25%. And that's great. Maybe even 50% increase. So we need to increase efficiency of everything we do. Um, whether it's lighting to go to LEDs, um, or or everything we do in life, we need to start increasing efficiency. But also, when we generate electricity, we need to think about capturing and sequestering carbon dioxide. And Michael Garjian, Mike, how do you say your name, last name? Garjian?
Guardian, yes.
Guardian, yeah, right. And so he has a business that is, in fact, capturing CO2. Um, and uh, and also Peter Baldwin talked about sequestering CO2. So that's one way of doing it, or helping. Um, but also switching to electricity. Let me just I got to move this a little bit, if you don't mind. Okay. All right. Switching to electricity produced with without burning fossil fuels. And so here in New England, we produce about 22% of our electricity by nuclear, um, about another 8%, 10% on hydro, and solar. I'll show you some numbers, and it looks like it's a small amount, but it's actually quite a bit. And I'll show you what that is. And also, wind is becoming more predominant as we build offshore wind farms. Uh, and then if we switch to whoops, hold on. Uh, excuse me. Let's see. Here we go. If we switch to EVs, um, we can reduce our CO2 per mile by about 75%. How's that? EVs are more efficient, number one, but also the electricity produced, making the electricity is about 50% with fossil fuels. And we'll take a look at a graph in that in a minute. Um, but also, pumps produce about half the CO2 that oil heat does. Not so much for gas heat. Um, I'm still a proponent that we need to heat homes with gas when natural gas when it's available. Um, and so, but if you got oil heat, like I have it in my house, I put in heat pumps, and it saves me money and it reduces CO2. Um, but the electricity that we use needs to be produced cleanly and cost effectively. So cleanly meaning wind, solar, nuclear. Cost effectively means to keep you can't pay a whole lot for electricity, or it's going to slow down the economy. Um, this is a picture of our New England grid. Um, you can see on the left-hand side, there's a lot of tie-ins to New York, where we import and sometimes export electricity. But also, you see the tie-ins at the top here. Those are DC, high voltage DC connections to Hydro-Quebec. There's a new one going in over here. You probably heard about that up in Maine. It's going to come down through the state and into the Boston area. And of course, we all know here in Winchester that we have a uh, putting up with a lot of construction of building a 345 kV line from Horn Pond all the way to Wakefield, where they're doing underground. And that's a very high voltage situation there. Then also all the way over to Boston, where now officially June 1st, the Mystic Station has been shut down. It was burning natural gas, and it was producing up to 1,200 megawatts as a peaker, and is no longer. So we don't have it as a resource, so we need to get the electricity down to Boston from up here. Let's talk about cost a little bit. This was from the other day, a couple of days ago in the late evening. I'm not sure what time it was, like around 9:30 or so. And that's the marginal wholesale cost of producing electricity. And so that's what the ISO is paying for electricity right now. And if you do, that's $30 per megawatt hour. That works out to be about 3 cents a kilowatt hour. So that's their marginal wholesale cost. So, and then we here in New England pay about 16 cents per kilowatt hour just for the energy portion now. Nothing to do with the distribution. Distribution would be another 17 cents, 16 or 17 cents. But let's just talk about the cost of generation. So that's about 3 cents, and that's at that moment. All right. But I recorded this on these are snapshots from my phone. Um, this was on remember, it was very hot last week. And you take a look at this, the load was about 22 gigawatts. And which is a high load, but we've seen much higher loads. For some reason, the cost of generation was $2,000 per megawatt hour. That works out to be $2 per kilowatt hour. That's their marginal wholesale cost of generation, meaning at that point in time, um, the ISO is buying electricity at that price, and then they are buying that from maybe there's still one coal-fired plant in New Hampshire. There's another oil-fired plant, and so they're paying a lot of money for that electricity at that moment. So um, so you can see how much it varies depending upon time of day and also what the load is. If it's a very hot, humid day, then things are. So now this is another screenshot that I took off my phone. And so you can download an app called ISO to go. And so it interfaces with the ISO uh, website. And so if it weren't for solar, okay, our load curve would be approximately where this yellow line is. Okay. And, and but what's going on here is the utilities are generating through their plants this blue line here. All right. So this is known as a duck curve because it's supposed to look like a duck. Um, but what's going on? This yellow line is what's called behind the meter solar generation. So that um, people, homes and businesses with uh, rooftop solar, they're generating their electricity for their own use and exporting it some back to the utility. It's not an inconsequential number. The distance between here and here, and you've noticed that's at noon, that is about, at that particular time, about 6 gigawatts. And so keep in mind, a nuclear power plant generates a little bit more than 1 gigawatt. So you've got 6 nuclear power plants equivalent on a nice sunny day. If the sun weren't shining, the utility would have to make up this electricity from other sources. So there's a big benefit in the area under this curve um, of solar power. And you can see how this tapers off here right around 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. And of course, this curve changes on rainy and cloudy days. It also changes in winter. And so, of course, we don't produce as much solar. All right. Um, so um, here's a little video on the duck curve. We don't need to get into that, but you can click on this when you have time. It's a couple of minute video describing how that duck curve uh, has come about because over the past 10 years because of growing solar power. And so, and as Tony would say, okay, so you got to have standby power. Tony Conti would say, you got to have standby power for that on those rainy days. And so we're going to get into that. By the way, I do want to show you this and tell me if it comes up on the screen. This link right here. This is ISO New England. When you click on that, okay. Tell me, can you see that on your screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
We
This
we
is what's
can't
going
see it.
on right now. All right.
Walter,
So,
we can't see anything if you've clicked on that site. We can see the image of the page with ISO New England on
oh,
it.
okay. You can't. Okay.
But
So
click.
let me see if I can bring that back.
Yeah.
So stand by for a second. Where's my Zoom? It's a new share. Hold on. Okay. I think right here. How about that? No. How about this? Can you see that now?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, there we go. Got it. Now we're
Can,
in. Yeah.
can you see the ISO's website?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Good.
Can, can you see the ISO website?
We see it,
Yes,
Walter.
Yeah,
yes,
we
we
can.
see it.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, you can't see it. Or you can't
Can,
see it.
can. It's all is good. Keep going.
Okay,
Good.
good, good. Okay, thank you. So you can see we're generating the wholesale cost is about 2 cents a kilowatt hour. That's great. Um, and about half of the electricity is being produced by natural gas, about 30% from nuclear. When it says renewables and it says 40% of 17%, that's not a whole lot. Um, because what this doesn't take into consideration is behind the meter or rooftop solar, which would go up on this curve here. All right. Um, Hydro is the hydro that we have here in New England, but it does not include imported hydro that we might be getting from Canada. And right now, there's no import because they don't need electricity. So see how low it is. And when electricity is down to 2 cents a kilowatt hour, um, it's there's no need to import electricity. These other renewables, by the way, wind, that's still a small amount. Refuse refuse is trash energy, and there's still a couple of wood burners. There's one out in the middle of the state. I believe there's one up in New Hampshire, and then there's some from landfill gas. So, so those are the sources typically, and I would recommend going to this website. I go there almost every day just to kind of check out things. So, all right, let me get back to our slides. If I can figure out how to change my screen sharing. Hold on. All right. So tell me if I'm back on the right screen. That should be my slides.
Yep.
Yeah,
You're
okay.
back.
And
You're
yeah,
back,
but
but you're on the first. There you go. You're
here we
back.
go. Good. Okay. Um, and now here's a point here that so here we are. Oops. Here we are in 2023. And so we're meeting our load, but as we go up to 2050, the winter peak, so it's heat pumps are getting installed and people driving EVs, and EVs are not as efficient in the winter as they are in the summer. Um, so our load more than doubles within 30 years. And so the dilemma comes here, how are we going to make up this quality from uh, the peak of gigawatts up to 55 gigawatts? And so let's take a look. So in years 20 years ago, we were burning coal, burning oil, and now we're burning those are the sources are gone, and we're burning a lot of natural gas. So that's where we are today, and this is what today looks like. This is this is on average for the year. Natural gas supplies about half in nuclear 20. The imports are coming mostly from Canada, mostly from so that's where we are now. And the renewables do not include behind the meter or rooftop solar. And then looking into the future, it's uh, another 8 gigawatt power. And of course, that wind power is fleeting. Sometimes it's 18 gigawatts. Sometimes it's a few gigawatts because the wind doesn't always blow. And then also you'll see solar will go up to 12 gigawatts. And again, the sun doesn't always shine. And therefore, you have battery storage, and it's proposed for 18 gigawatts are proposed. So, but also new transmission lines coming from Canada. So, um, so we're going to see a lot of load growth due to electric vehicles and heat pumps. And at least in the next less than 10 years, another 1.5 gigawatts. And heat pumps likewise. And for total growth of within 6-7 years, we need 3 gigawatts. That's our load. And then now in other parts of the country, and Marv, you can appreciate this from an AI standpoint. The exponential growth of data centers for AI and Bitcoin and cloud data. The We don't see that a whole lot of that here because our electricity cost is so high. So it doesn't make sense to locate those data centers here, but certainly New York is seeing it, and other areas of the country with lower cost. So, so what are we doing about that? You can see we got more power coming in from in Canada, so that's another 1,200 megawatts, and we got another 1,200 megawatts coming up from way upstate Maine, and then we've got offshore wind. Vineyard Wind should be completed by the end of the year for 800 megawatts, and so let's talk about these are planned offshore wind farms, and so here we are back here, and here's Vineyard Wind over here. So that's one that is constructed or almost constructed all the way. And then the cables, by the way, come all the way into Barnstable, right here, all on the seafloor. All right. So that is 62 very large wind turbines, 13 megawatts each. And yet, multiply it out, and nominal nameplate is about 100 megawatts. But the wind doesn't always blow. It blows more consistently out offshore than it does. And then the next one that's being built is Revolution Wind. Actually, this small station right here, that's South Fork. That's for New York and Connecticut. And then Revolution Wind, that's been purchased by Connecticut and Rhode Island. And I was at the beach right here in Rhode Island, right here, last week ago, and you could hear the monopoles being installed. It was dump, dump, dump. And so these are big machines getting installed. These other plants are being planned. They could be pie in the sky. Incidentally, the cost per the contracted cost per kilowatt hour is 8.5 cents for Vineyard Wind. Revolution Wind is around 9 cents. Now, remember we talked about right now the generation is about 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So this is going to increase our cost per our cost of generation. So now possible solutions to our long term. We can increase generation with natural gas, especially for peakers. The problem is here in New England, we don't have a lot of natural gas coming, and we have one pipeline coming across the state, and our governor has blocked the installation of a second gas line. So and to meet need, even household need right now, we're still importing natural gas from outside the country um, to the Mystic Station, not for generation of electricity, but for distribution in the households. We can increase our battery storage. I have a battery at my home, um, and the utility has the right to take electricity from that as needed, and they're paying me for the electricity, but also for the privilege of extracting electricity from that. So I've given them that permission. And if we have a lot of batteries in a distributed sense on a lot of houses, that could be one of our solutions. But also, there's going to be battery farms throughout the area in the next 20 years. Uh, buy more hydro from Quebec. That's under discussion. Um, pump storage. You're probably aware out in the western part of the state, there's a very large lake that gets pumped up and down daily, supplying about 1.2 gigawatts of electricity. And so that's what pump storage, that's essentially a battery using water. Um, and then local solar and batteries is another solution. Um, but also time of use metering so that you can the utility will price their electricity higher during peak times. So in a hot summer day, it would be a higher price than it is. So that's a policy that has not been established yet here in Massachusetts, but it is in some other states. Um, and you can have parking lot photovoltaics and batteries, and my favorite is to look at solar panels on the Jenks Center. So, um, now, but in the long term, like let's look out in the year 2040. So ISOs had a request to they have vendors that want to supply electricity on these sources, and so with battery, look how much the 20 gigawatts of battery storage. It's of course that's from solar, so you can charge the batteries and use the batteries at night, but also wind and other um, industrial solar. This does not include home solar. So those are sources that we're looking out by 20 years. So, but what can we do? Us little people, what can we do about trying to reduce CO2? We can, you can get an electric or a plug-in hybrid, or just a hybrid, just to um, reduce CO2 you burn per mile. You can put a solar system in. They're very economical these days. The cost of solar panels have come way down, partly because of Chinese manufacturing. Or you can install a heat pump, but frankly, I only recommend it if you're using oil heat. If you're using gas heat, it's you're not going to save money. Um, and you can help save the planet by changing your energy use habits by simply changing your time of day usage, meaning try to use electricity like for air conditioning and clothes washing when the load is low on the rest of the system. And then now Ken Pruitt, here's a line for you, or a pitch for you to sign up for an all renewable electric land such as wind power. And I believe we're going to be talking about that come next fall sometime. So, okay, now let's see. I want to hold on a second. I need to get to my. I'm gonna unmute everybody, if you
Good.
don't mind, so we
Mhm.
can have a discussion. All right. I got to figure out how to do that. Ron, can you do that for me?
Let's see, John, I don't know. Maybe
I
one of us can. Let's see if I can figure out.
I think that my experience
Please
is that
read chat.
you can the host can mute people, but all they
Yeah.
can do is request people to unmute themselves. You can't
Okay.
surreptitiously unmute somebody, so they might be having a discussion. You
Okay.
want to know what it is? Just
So,
Read
unmute
so,
the
so
them.
let's do it this way.
my comments.
If you have so I've got some provocative questions coming up in the next slide. Um,
Okay.
so, um, so and jump right in. And so this is kind of like a summary of our discussion on electricity through the past year. And so, I, I'll tell you what. Jump right in, but I'll tell you what. Raise your hands, but I encourage everybody to do what they can do. Okay. So, the next slide
No
is
raise hand capability.
Yes, there is. If you go to reset or
yeah.
react, I'm sorry, there's a raise your
Okay.
hand.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, uh, okay. Avi, go ahead. Let's see. This
Good.
is. Let's see. I'm having a little trouble getting everything working here. Okay. Um, so, the first question is global warming real? Um, and so I know we've talked about this in past. Um, and so let's talk about it a little bit right now because I know it's a politically hot topic. But let's see. So who we got with raised hands? Let's see. Okay, we'll start off with Avi. Go ahead.
Well, I wasn't asking a question of whether global warming is real, but I had two questions. One, whether using the tidal energy could be a factor. And the second is, I thought for a long time that supposing you took a major route like Route 93 and underneath it in sections, you put in effect a piezoelectric system. You have these thousands of heavy vehicles going across. And if you had something that sensed the pressure and converted that in a piezoelectric system, you get a pulse of electricity every time a car went over. I've done none of the calculations, but I just wonder whether that would be a source of electricity. I haven't gotten into the idea of how much it would cost to construct it, but could we use that to generate some electricity from traffic that's already flowing?
Yeah. So I don't know the answer to that question, but I wonder if anyone's looked into it or anybody has any knowledge in the group on that. No. So, so Frank, so I'll tell you what, I that all right.
I can chime in that some vehicles recover engine heat from the exhaust and generate electricity for the vehicle. Very doable. Down in the noise, though, of solving our problem.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah,
that's very different from the weight of the vehicle
yeah.
going over and causing
But that's a perpetual motion machine, Avi.
a piezoelectric
No,
system.
well, not really, not really, Drew. I think his point is that as the cars bounce along the road, it could generate some electricity
I'm talking about the
that could be
pressure of
captured.
pressure of the car on the road.
Yeah.
Right
Right.
now,
But that
it's
energy
merely
comes from the gas of the car going through it.
what?
That energy comes from the gasoline propelling the car. It's not new
Yeah,
energy.
no, it still goes over a bump, and
No.
so yeah,
And people have done suspensions that recover energy as well to drive electricity to the car. But again, down in the noise and perpetual since it has to come from somewhere first.
it does have to come from somewhere. Yeah, you're right. Okay, I'll tell you what, I'm going to look into that. All right, and see if I can find any information.
Can I
Well,
chime in?
I will say,
Hello? Piezoelectric crystals are very expensive. I buy sensors,
Yes.
maybe 1 millimeter square or 2 millimeter by 2, and that's $400-500. Now, of course, you can make the argument that the Chinese can reduce the price over time, but that's not a cheap solution.
Yeah, I will
agree.
say thermodynamically too, it's actually not going to work very well. All that is happening in the vibration mode, as it were, is that you're warming up the road. And really, as Albert just said, it's just
Yeah.
extraordinarily expensive to do piezoelectric. You're better off if you can to generate electricity, maybe by getting inductive uh, uh, energy from the movement of the cars, but then you're taking energy out of the movement of the cars,
Yeah,
which means you're taking energy out of the gasoline engines or
that wouldn't
whatever.
work. Yeah.
Let
So
me make a
none of this works.
let me make
Okay.
a suggestion.
Yeah.
I'd like to suggest we go back to the question: is global
Yeah.
warming
That's
real?
right.
Well, but
Yep.
let me just add one
Well,
comment to obvious point. My understanding is that on a Prius, you have there's some things called traction batteries that are actually charged up while the car is moving. So there are means of doing that. It doesn't provide much charge. You couldn't run the car solely on a battery, on the traction battery, but it means that you have a hybrid gasoline and electric automobile. The battery is charged by
Yeah.
moving the
It,
car. So
and certainly that's the way all EVs work too.
yeah,
and Ron, I've got a Prius Prime, and I see that every day.
right.
Yeah.
That's my
There you
point.
go.
That's my
Yeah.
point. So,
Yep.
I mean, to
Okay.
Avi's comment, I think there are ways of doing this. Maybe not to the extent of charging up a full battery and running the car exclusively, but there may be other ways of reaching that goal. I don't think we should give up on that philosophy.
All
I,
right.
It's
I
a
wasn't
really,
even thinking of it for the car. I was thinking it was to generate a source of electricity to be used anywhere.
well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it would be tough to capture,
Gotcha.
Thermodynamically, not.
but
Yeah.
I'll look into that. So let's move on to Tony. So Tony,
Yep, thank
what's
you,
up?
Walter. I don't dispute that global warming is real. I just question the cause of it. I think it's a natural phenomenon that doesn't rely on human activity. I know that's going to be disputed. That the only point I wanted to raise was about the alternative energy requiring backup sources. The problem is that the fossil fuel plants required for backup purposes are being rendered uneconomic. That's why the Mystic plant had to close, because it wasn't economic, because it doesn't, they rely, their economics rely upon continuous generation. This on and off phenomenon that backup requires just is not economic to operate. And we're heading ourselves into a real crisis of electric generation. If these fossil plants are forced to close because they're uneconomic, we're going to be in a real bind.
Yeah. Tony, good point, because you're right. Gas-fired peakers much more expensive to run. Baseload gas turbines are called a combined cycle, where they have a steam turbine attached to them as well. And so you can get total efficiencies out of that around 65%. Whereas if it's just a peaker, I believe the efficiency's down around 35%, somewhere around there. So the cost of generation is higher on a peaker. I think what the goal is, Tony, is to replace the peakers with a battery backup, and on the other hand, that's very expensive too. The cost per kilowatt hour is very expensive for that, although the price is coming down. But if we keep our eye on the prize where we want to reduce CO2, and I realize so 10, 12 years ago, I was kind of in your camp, Tony, where, okay, there's other things that's going on in the world that might be causing global warming. Like the tilt of the Earth, but I've come around full circle to the CO2 and methane cause. So that's why I think we need to set a goal, and that goal has to be through public policy, and that's where we are in trying to reduce our CO2 through the utility. So, all right, Ron, you have a comment? Your hands up?
Well, yeah, I do. I mean, I think that the question of whether climate change is real or not is, I think that to a lot of people, is still open. If Dick Lindzen, you mentioned Dick and Kerry Emanuel, who spoke to us last year, if he were here today, I don't know whether he would today agree that climate change is real. I personally find it difficult to not see that it's real, given what we're going through on this planet, all over the planet, in terms of unusual and sometimes very violent climate issues.
Yep.
But the issue,
Yeah.
the question then becomes: is it a natural part of the natural climate cycle, or is it something that's being accelerated by man? That, I think, is the fundamental. And whichever it is, the fact is we got to respond to it. We have glaciers melting, the seas are the seashores are rising, the sea level is rising, seashores are being inundated. There are a lot of consequences to what's happening today. Somehow, I think there's a need to respond to it.
Sure.
So,
And,
go ahead.
wildfires and hurricanes.
Yeah.
Looks like we're going to have 17 named storms this year is what's predicted.
Yeah.
And that's due to the warming waters in the Gulf of Mexico and in the Atlantic. So
Well,
something's causing that.
Yeah, likewise the rainfall. I mean, as the temperature rises, the air is has a higher saturation level of water, and when it rains, it pours. And we
Yeah.
don't get rain. We don't get rain in fractions of an inch anymore. We get rain in inches. That is
Yeah.
truly unusual.
So,
And
so
it's
folks,
happening
the
all over
question of the question of global warming, though, isn't it moot? We're seeing the results of something we don't understand, and what are we doing to be able to actually deal with it?
Well,
We can
that's
deal
the
with it
point.
ahead of time. We can deal with it as it presents itself. It's
Yeah.
obviously a lot cheaper, and it saves a lot more suffering if we deal with it ahead of time. So I think the whole discussion about whether it's real or not is not really relevant. What are we doing right now with what we're facing? How are we doing it? And what can we do that's a good bet? If you want to go to the casino on this, what's a good bet for being able to head some of it off?
Right.
Yeah,
I
in
think
fact,
that's exactly
that's
right. Go ahead.
that's the next point I got right here. So, what's the cost to society of not doing anything? And on the other hand, what's the cost of reducing CO2? The point that Tony brings up. Okay, if we get rid of the natural gas plants baseload, our electricity cost is going to go up. So we got to figure out what the balance is there, but also we got to figure out what the cost is of not reducing the CO2, and I think that's what you were saying, John. If we don't do anything now, it could have devastating economic effects.
Walter, you have two hands up. To Eddie
Okay, and actually, Michael, you had your hand up. I inadvertently put your hand down. So if you got any questions, Mike, go ahead, jump in.
Yeah, I hesitate to do this at times, but I'm the independent inventor here, and because sometimes we are perceived as a bit of a loony group, sometimes we have to say things that are different that you folks can't say because you're esteemed folks from MIT. So I'm going to throw something out. based on testimony that I'm seeing from whistleblowers from the government, including the former Secretary of Defense of Israel, the former Secretary of Defense of Canada, and Ben Rich, the former 25-year tenured head of the Lockheed Skunk Works, the most secret organization corporate in the world, there is more and more discussion that we, in fact, have reverse engineered power sources driving UAPs, and that this whole thing we're all going through is totally unnecessary because a very elite group in the military, among Lockheed, Raytheon, McDonnell Douglas, have figured out anti-gravity and infinite energy and even interstellar travel. And this is coming from some very legitimate people. So as crazy as it sounds, I haven't decided whether this is really legit or not, but there's a lot of conversation coming out from folks who are dying saying, I can't keep this secret anymore. And here's what I know. So even among MIT, I'm sure there are some answers to this question because a lot of research is being done at MIT. But I just wanted to toss that out to kind of mix it up a little
Michael,
bit.
that does sound far-fetched. On the other hand, I think we're looking at a possibility to have nuclear fusion in 30 years. So there
Michael,
is
why is it being kept secret? If there's anti-gravity or whatever.
good point. Yeah.
Because it would completely undermine the way things are. There's a lot of money being made by some very powerful people on oil and things like this. And so, and then there's the question of what's the impact on society if in fact there are extraterrestrial intelligences that we're actually communicating with.
Okay. Right. All right.
I know that.
Moving on, John.
Michael, I've been hearing that
John
for the
Brown, I think you're
past
next.
20 years.
Well, it's been going on
50
since
years.
1954, Eddie.
Yeah, I meant 50 years.
Okay, we're off topic.
Yeah,
John,
exactly.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's my obligation.
I'll take the floor here, even though as in my screen, it looked like Eddie was ahead of me. But anyway, so what is the cost to society? We're talking about, can we reduce CO2, blah, blah, blah. And, and you also actually something Tony hasn't brought up yet, but I'm sure he will, is, if we in Massachusetts cut our CO2 to nothing, to zero, that didn't do it for the rest of the world. But in terms of the cost to us locally, I just saw last week the documentary Inundation District. I don't know if have you heard of it yet or okay, no, it was a documentary made by somebody from WGBH or something like that. It isn't on wide release yet. It's just being shown at some film festivals and so forth. And next it'll go to PBS, and then after that it'll go to streaming. But what are we in Boston doing? Well, we're building millions of square feet of high-rise offices on landfill at the seashore edge. It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. I had a little boat ride from the Freedom Trail back to where I started, and it goes by, and oh my gosh, it's gorgeous. And you see names like Amazon and stuff on these buildings. The big corporations have their buildings. And it's gorgeous. And it's all going to be underwater in a few decades. And there's no public policy that can stop that. So we're just increasing the cost. That's going to be a huge albatross to the city of Boston, state of Massachusetts, maybe the United States. I don't know who's going to clean it up, but what's going to happen is the sea level is going to rise. The first floor of those buildings go underwater. The buildings will be abandoned. They're going to decay. It's going to be this massive mess. Somebody's got to, then somebody will have to deal with imploding. I mean, the businesses that occupy them now will be long gone. You're just going to have these empty decaying buildings. But anyway, that's current policy. in the documentary, they have one of the developers talking about, it looks, if you just look at it, it looks like we're done. No, there's 15 million square feet more that's going to be built in there. But anyway, but we can't stop that, and they're very happy, and they're going to make money because they're going to make money in the short term. They're going to make it. They're going to sell it. Within 10 years, they've made back their money. In 20 years, they've doubled their money. In 30 years, they're out of there. In 40 years, it's a big mess for the city. But I just thought I would get that. That's not the global warming part, but that's about the dealing with it, or the failure to deal with it, or the ability to make it worse that we have.
Yeah. And as Drew just mentioned on chat, there is discussion about building a dike across the harbor to protect the harbor, like is done in Holland. And I think you're talking about the seaport area, right, John?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
it's officially called the Seaport Innovation District, the Seaport Innovation District, but the name of the movie is the Inundation District, because that's what it's going to become eventually.
Okay. Got it. All right. Now let's see. Who else has their hand up? Let's see. Al.
Eddie and Albert.
Actually, my question relates to what John Brown said.
Yeah.
And it's very simple, but a practical issue, because I'm considering buying a condo on the Charles River. And my question to you is, are the predictions that Cambridge, Charles River area will also flood, despite the dam at the Museum of Science? Do we know?
Hey, can I just interrupt for a second? John, if I can just interrupt for a second. Eddie's been waiting a long time, and multiple people have passed him by. I don't know what's going on, but just
Alan, Eddie has spoken. So
is Eddie's hand up or not?
Excuse me, but I have not spoken. I have spoken a bit, maybe, about the road, etc.
Sure.
And I quite frankly don't know what's going on here, Walter. But I don't think that you're. I won't say anything, but I will say this. First of all, I only go by what research is, the real hard data, the real hard work that, I don't know, tens of thousands of scientists have done across this world. Also, even by the research that people within the oil and gas industry came up with back in 70 years ago, and even going further back than that. The fact is that global warming is occurring, and it is occurring as a result of CO2 production. And there is very, very little that you can argue against that. That is the reality, and we are producing the CO2. So I don't know what the argument is against it, other than it just is simply in vapor land at this point. The other thing that I'm going to say is that I don't believe that any of the, wind is a problem. Solar is maybe a partial answer. But I think that in the end, we have to look to other types of energy production, including fusion and deep geothermal. And I don't think that what we have right now are good solutions. And I even agree with Tony that, in fact, wind is probably going to be problematic over time because of the changing climate situation. I don't know how predictable that is going to be. So let's start thinking. I think we have to think about something else. The other thing I'm worried about in getting energy from Canada is that the Canadian demand for energy is also going to rise. And I don't know what plans there are if Canada is going to produce more energy up in the James Bay area, whether they're going to dam more rivers or use tidal energy production. I'm knowledgeable about. Maybe you may know more than I do about that.
Yes, certainly Hydro Quebec is contracted for 1.2 gigawatts due to come down here in about a year and a half. They're waiting for the transmission line to be completed. That was held up in court. So I don't know if there's any more plans after that, but certainly 1.2 gigawatts helps. And also when you say wind, Eddie, I think you're referring to the offshore wind that
Right.
we're looking at here, as opposed to the many wind farms in the Midwest, which are producing very inexpensive electricity right now. Whereas the electricity offshore is probably twice the production cost because of the requirements for the building. So, and also it's being held up now because of lack of resources. One of the resources being the ships capable of installing it, and those are made in the European Union. So yeah, okay. Does that answer your question, Eddie?
Partially, yes. I just, 10 cents a kilowatt, maybe that's less than at least $2 a kilowatt. But if we're only generating 1.2 gig from Canada, then that's still a small percent. Well, a significant percentage, but it's not a huge percentage. So I don't know what the weighted average of costs are.
Yeah.
I'm a bit lost on that one.
The main wind is land-based for another 1.2 gigawatts. That's up in the Prescott area. So there is that source coming. Okay, so it looks like let's see.
Ken and John.
John and Ken. Okay. So
no, Ken and John. Let's go to Ken first. His hand is up for a while.
Okay, good. Go ahead. Go ahead, Ken.
Great, thank you. I'm so glad I was able to attend today's session. I found it so interesting. And Walter, your presentation was really excellent. And I want to ask a couple of questions based on it. One is just I've been wondering this for a while. I suppose I could look it up. The imports of electricity from outside of New England. I'm curious what the breakdown is. Is it all hydro? Is it a mixture of hydro and wind? Is there gas in there? I'm curious what the percentages are on an average day, or more importantly, on a peak day. What's coming in from imports? And then the other question, if there's time for it, is you were mentioning battery storage growth in the future to be able to fully take advantage of renewables. Were you including EV car batteries in that in the future? We're I think likely to see bidirectional charging. And so potentially everyone's EVs become, part of the battery backup solution. So those are the two questions I have.
Yeah. So Ken, last question first. No, I'm not including that. And then, but that is a source. Certainly, if we have a lot of EVs out there that can go both ways and supply energy at least to your own home. And maybe to the grid during peak times. So that's another source that's not included. In relation to the import of electricity, I tried to find that number on ISO's website. By the way, many of these graphics were from the ISO New England website. But we are getting hydropower from Canada right now, and also from New York. And they're getting into wind. However, a few weeks ago, we were actually supplying power to Canada because of a drought. As you know, with the wildfires up in Canada, are caused partly by the drought that's going up there. So Canada's having water issues as well, and therefore power issues. So the hope is that the drought is resolved. But so to your point, we can't really depend upon uh, sources that are fleeting like that, and also to Tony. Well, geez, maybe we need more natural gas for more consistent power. At least has as a backup. So, all right, we got one more hand up. That is John's, and so go ahead, John.
You're muted,
um,
John. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're muted again. Okay. Good.
There you are, John.
Okay. Yeah. Right. This isn't what I'm going to say, but just in response to what you just said, if you're going to do any more gas, then you got to sequester that. It's not an easy or cheap thing to do. But
Right.
as far as relying on the hydro from Canada, you know, we sell to them when they need it if we have excess, and they sell to us when we need it if they have excess. So that 1.2 gigawatt from new hydro in Quebec is if they have it and we need it, then we have the transmission that we can get it. But if we need it and they don't have it, we don't get it. And basically what I'm getting at is when we're going to be needing it is in the winter. Now we're thinking in the summer, which is our peak, but in the future, the peak is going to be the winter because we're going to all go to heat pumps, and we're going to need power in the winter to keep warm. In the summer, it's really great when we need air conditioning. That's when we got all the solar coming beating down on, and we're getting the 6 gigawatt or whatever behind the meter to run our air conditioning. That's great. In the winter, when we need it, is the coldest, darkest day of the year, and there's no solar. And then we go and say to Canada, oh, okay, we got our line here. Give us some of your hydropower. Well, the problem is Canada is colder than we are. So they're going to say, well, fortunately, we have hydropower to keep us warm to run our heat pumps, so we won't get it.
Yeah, but John, we don't know that. This is a contracted 1.2 gigawatts, and so it's a power purchase agreement. Okay. So they're obligated to supply it, and then we're obligated to purchase it as well. And so,
okay. Anyway, that was just something I heard, just something to keep in mind, that we're relying on somebody who's going to probably be needing that at the same time we are. At our peak, it's their peak also.
But they're also planning for their production in their export. I mean, Canada's been selling us electricity for 20 years. So there's going to be they're allocating 1.2 gigawatts for here on top of their own needs as well. But at the like last month, they needed electricity from us. So I noticed that Drew, I think, posted something about we're front of the meter solar. We're producing 688 megawatts, so say 3/4 of a gigawatt right now. So that's from the solar.
Actually,
plants.
Walter, it's they're producing 744 out of 688, or 20% really? More than they say they're capable of producing at this time.
Okay.
So well, we got to get them to revise that capability estimate.
Yeah. And so anyhow, that's coming from the solar farms. That's not coming from the rooftop solar, which is probably putting out 6 gigawatts right now. And so it's an enormous amount of power that's being generated by solar, and an enormous amount of power that's not producing CO2. So we can't overlook the impact of solar on the generation of or the reduction of CO2. All right, there's one more. See, I
Tom
can't see
Halbert.
all the hands.
Yeah,
Okay,
Tom.
Tom, yeah.
Yes. Toyota is the largest car manufacturer in the world, and they have made a rather strange decision not to invest in total electric vehicle design or production because I've seen the Toyota executive say this on a YouTube video. In their estimates, the electrical grid of the developed countries is in no way in a position to even expand to service the needs of all vehicles becoming electric by 2050. That it just can't happen. At least that's their estimate. And since we're focused here on the grid, I thought it might be worth mentioning this.
Sure. Yeah. So Tom, that's certainly a concern. On the other hand, my electric vehicle, I charge at night when load is low. And then, so if everybody's and charging your vehicle can be put off to a different time when electricity cost is lower and available. And the other thing to consider is if we can produce electricity in a more distributed way for from your home, for example, in solar, that's even one step better. But the point, I think the point that you're making is that we've got if everybody switches over to EVs, then maybe so I don't have that calculation. We can see the load growth is doubling from what it is today to 2050. And ISO New England, it looks like they can answer that question, but even on their website, they hedge a little bit about how they're going to meet that need. So, so good point, Tom. And I can understand Toyota's concern, but also I think the costs of producing an EV these days are coming way down, and now they are competitive with a ICE version vehicle, especially with the new Chevy Equinoxes that just came out. So, but good point, Tom.
Just to add a comment, I did see a similar quote from the Toyota leadership that Tom has just mentioned. So I know that they're serious about this, but I also know there's been a lot of discussion about alternatives to the current grid, local grids, for example, instead of having the grid as it now exists to design the grid, to rebuild it, and to introduce energy sources locally. That can happen. That we're at a very early stage in trying to deal with what I think is a major issue for this planet, the demand for electricity, and it's only going to increase. We haven't yet reached the tip of the iceberg with AI, and the demand that AI is imposing on the grid is enormous. So.
Enormous.
I see we're at 11:52. I don't see any other hands. This has been I find it's an exhilarating conversation. I see John's hand, but I just want to make one comment. This conversation is really important. And part of it convinces me that the Wilson Forum has real merit, because this gives us a chance, not as technologists, as citizens, as concerned Americans and concerned inhabitants of this planet. It gives us an opportunity to look at an important issue from a perspective that I don't see how we would have done without the forum. So, Walter, I'm enormously happy that you presented this summary. It was superbly done. I'm enormously happy to have all the conversation that we've had in the last, I don't know, 40 minutes or so. It's been absolutely fascinating. I see something like 50 chats that I haven't had a chance to pursue, but I know we provoke a lot of interest on the part of a lot of people. And I think this is extremely important for not only for the town of Winchester, but for all of us. Now, I do see two hands, so I'm going to turn to John and then to Alan. Go ahead, John.
Okay, I was going to say one thing that AI can do positive here. I mean, the negative is they're going to draw a whole lot of electricity, meaning that all the new renewable electricity we're trying to generate, it's going to go to AI. We're not going to be able to get, net new renewable energy for the things we're now getting dirty energy from. But one thing that AI can do is it can control our use of appliances, when to use it, when to charge, when to not charge, et cetera. Control our appliances. If you have time of use rates, control for us the optimal time to use electricity, which will presumably, when it's cheap, but it also presumably that means when there's adequate clean energy on the grid. So I just want to say that is one positive future use of AI.
Yeah, we'll come back to that in the fall. There are a lot of other issues that will come up, I'm sure. But Alan, let's go to Alan.
Yeah. Just briefly on the topic of what can we do. Wind Power 100 was mentioned earlier, and that's something we in our house here have used for many years now. But I think we all understand that the electron that's generated somewhere, like from a wind farm, we can't follow that electron directly to our house. It's not, so people sometimes get confused about that. And so what's slightly confusing is that you can add these things on top of each other. You're basically doing things to support the renewable industry and the production of renewable energy. So for example, we have Wind Power 100. So that sort of means like we have 100% renewable electricity. Actually, it's more than 100% because of the state mandates. But what we've done, we've signed up for a solar farm share in Massachusetts. And it took about a year for that process to get to completion. But so now we're also supporting solar generation at that solar farm and buying a share of what they produce. So in a sense, we're like, if you pick a wild number, maybe we're like 200% renewable or something, or 220%. Now, I don't know. We don't have solar on a roof because I'm in a condo and we can't do that. I don't know if you could, in addition, put solar on your roof and maybe you could have it's sort of a theoretical 300% supporting your electrical consumption from renewables. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Alan, I want to point out that again, to Tony's point, the solar is great while the sun's shining. I think along with solar, it needs to be equivalent battery storage as well, so that on those cold winter nights, we're going to have electricity to run our heat pumps.
Yeah, certainly. All those other issues still pertain. That's true.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Let's go to Michael, and then we'll let Marv have the final word. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I've read in many places that one of the most powerful things that we can do to solve the issue is conserve electricity. And we all know that we leave lights on, the television's on when no one's in there. You look at office towers in these cities when the entire tower is lit up with fluorescent lighting and no one's in there. And, that needs to be addressed. And I think I foresee an AI meter down the road that will enforce conservation, that will understand what is being used in a building, when it's being used, and it will just shut down the use of or shut down energy draw where it's not needed. And I think there's some great opportunities there. I just don't know why the Empire State Building is so visible at night when no one's in there. And so a lot of this electricity just being wasted because people don't care. And because we're humans, I think intervention will be required. And there may be a possibility that AI will be just the trick to control meter usage.
Good point. Good point. Marv, you're up. You have the final word today.
Well, but I don't know if this is a good final word, but I think one of the issues that are parallel, if you will, between the general issues in AI and the general issues in this area is that there are a lot of efforts being done in an uncoordinated way by good meaning people who think they're solving part of the problem without realizing they're creating another part of the problem. So as an example of that, there's a UK startup, battery startup, Niobolt, who just recently announced, and with evidence, that they have a chargeable car battery that can charge on a fast charger in less than 5 minutes from 10 to 80% charge. That, if it's real, let's get adopted. And let's presume that some point that something like that will. The issue of when you charge your car and where you charge and infrastructure becomes a big deal, because one of the major reasons why there's been a drop off in the adoption of EVs is distance fear and charging fear and time. I did my personal estimate on what it would take for me to go to Ithaca to visit friends with my gas guzzler versus an EV. And my gas guzzler gets me there in 6 hours, and an EV gets me there in 2 days because I have to stop overnight to charge it and stay in a hotel. But that does shift the load tonight. If a battery is real, and even Tesla can charge on that fast charger, I guess, in about 20 minutes. But if you can get it down to 5 minutes, you're now in the same time frame as filling up your tank with gas. Then that may well accelerate the sale of EVs. But then you have the infrastructure issues, and you have the fact that the load for charging shifts to the day. And my point is not so much that's illustrative, that we're going at all these issues in extremely piecemeal ways. I don't have an alternative to it, but I think it's important for us to understand that, because they're not maximally efficient. Even if a specific solution is maximally efficient within its range, none of them are maximally efficient in the combination with the rest of the efforts being done. And therefore, even the best plans are going to fall short of the goals because unintended consequences.
Yeah. Well, look, I think it's a point well taken, Marv. I mean, all of these things are on the radar screen, and we've got to deal with them. But Walter, I want to thank you again on behalf of all of us. You've done a yeoman's job here today of summarizing nearly 2 years of activity in terms of the forum that has been related to the electric grid, to climate issues, and frankly, I think you've done a brilliant job. So
thank you.
You have my loud applause, and I think we've all learned something today. We got a better perspective than we did at the beginning of this hour, or hour and a half, and I just want to thank you all for joining in and taking part. So we'll get together again in September. Marv and Ron Smith and I and Bernard Sohm will all be involved in getting us launched on a discussion of generative AI. And I think that'll be a really exciting time, a really important time for us. In the meanwhile, I hope you folks enjoy the summer. We have the next 2 months off, so take care and have fun. All right.
And thanks, Ron, for organizing everything.
Yeah, thank you, Avi. I appreciate that. Take care, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.